And now we're back to our main topic of the day as William B. Taylor, former US ambassador to Ukraine, joins us now to discuss the latest from the war-torn country. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador.
Good evening, Maciej.
So Ukraine celebrates Flag Day today, and on Monday, the 35th anniversary of its statehood. It is a symbolic occasion that gathers Ukraine's partners, who will also convene in Kyiv for the Coalition of the Willing Summit. Now, we have already learned that Germany will supply the country with some 600 Patriot interceptors. But do you expect more major decisions to be announced to mark this special occasion?
They could, Maciej. The Coalition of the Willing has indicated it's preparing to put forces on the ground in Ukraine after a ceasefire. And that could take some steps over the next couple of days. The immediate issue, the Patriots that the Germans just talked about, could be matched by other nations. Other nations have some Patriots that they could give up. And as we see, as you've reported, the Russians are bombarding the Ukrainians every day with ballistic missiles that only the Patriots can defend against.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, is there any particular reason for the Nordic Baltic 8 to arrive in Ukraine ahead of the 35th anniversary celebrations tomorrow? Is this to show the northern countries some special commitment to the Ukrainian cause?
I think the northern countries feel the threat from Russia most acutely. Obviously, the Ukrainians feel it more than anyone. But in terms of NATO members, the nations that are closest to Russia understand the threat even better than other nations, certainly better than the United States. So yes, I think their commitment, the northern nations' commitment to Ukraine's success and defense is commendable.
Mr. Ambassador, today President Zelenskyy announced that Ukraine needs some 30 billion euros to protect its skies from Russian attacks, and it needs it to safely survive winter. Now, about 10 days ago, the very same politician claimed that Ukraine has money to acquire Patriot interceptors straight from the US. Are these contradictory statements? How to understand these messages coming from Kyiv?
Not necessarily, Maciej. As you know and have reported, the European Union has provided $100 billion, $105 billion, 90 billion euros to Ukraine in terms of a no-interest loan that will only be paid back when the Russians pay reparations. Probably never. So the Ukrainians can use part of that loan to purchase weapons. And as I said earlier, the immediate need that the Ukrainians face is to protect themselves from these ballistic missiles that the Russians fire into Ukraine every day. So they want to use some portion of those funds, and there needs to be steps taken. The European Union needs to take steps in order to make those funds available.
Let's now discuss the ongoing dispute of wartime elections in Ukraine. So let me quote President Zelenskyy here. Elections right now are a tsunami for the state that will split Ukraine. That's in response to the former defense minister, Mikos Fedorov, calling for these wartime elections. Now, is this idea still alive, or has it been already rejected by Ukraine's partners? I'm wondering here.
Maciej, I think it's been rejected by the Ukrainian people. I've talked to many Ukrainians, and I've found no one who wants to have elections during wartime. So the former defense minister, Maciej Fedorov, has made this statement, but he seems to be the only one who is pushing for that. There are not very many Ukrainians who want to do that, primarily because there are 1 million soldiers that would have a hard time voting. And there are probably 4 million Ukrainians in other countries, including Poland, that would have a hard time voting, as well as just trying to secure polling places from attacks by the Russians. So I have found very, very few people, Ukrainians, who are interested in these elections now.
Well, Ukraine may have some reservations, but Russia will conduct its parliamentary elections next month, also on the occupied territories of Ukraine in Donbas. Do you think that Ukraine should refrain from attacking these polling stations, the very, in the very same way that Russians would just simply bomb them?
The Ukrainians, Maciej, do not attack civilian targets. The Ukrainians go after military targets. They go after energy targets that will reduce the revenues going into the war machine. They go after parts of the Russian industry that manufactures these missiles that we've been talking about. So the Ukrainians don't go after civilian targets. The Ukrainians go after military targets, and I would expect them to go for it. But I would also say, when you call them elections in Russia, that's stretching it. We know how the Russians conduct elections.
That is true, but I just fear that, by letting Russia go on with elections, Ukraine somehow legitimizes these fake elections also in the occupied territories of eastern Ukraine.
Maciej, I think we all know that these are illegitimate elections that the Russians put on every now and then. They just disqualified the only opposition party who had no chance. But President Putin was worried that votes for this opposition party, Yabloko, might demonstrate there are a lot of Russians who don't like this war. So these are not real elections, and I don't think the Ukrainians, by refraining from going after polling stations, will legitimize them.
Elections aside, the former defense minister Mikhail Fedorov also talks about the scale of corruption in the defense ministry, and he claims that it makes ending the war with Russia from the position of force unrealistic. How would you comment on these words?
There do need to be reforms in defense procurement, there's no doubt. And Fedorov began those. I think his successor, who was just approved by the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada, his successor will continue those reforms and will continue to root out corruption, because Fedorov is right. Corruption can affect the ability of the Ukrainian military to defeat the Russians. So it needs to be addressed. I think they are doing that, and I think that's an important part for them.
U.S. envoys Kushner and Witkoff were expected to visit Moscow as well as Kyiv this very month. They have not arrived in either of the places. What has changed in this American idea for conducting diplomacy in both warring countries?
Well, as you know, the United States has diverted its focus from Russia and Ukraine to Iran. And the same two envoys that you just mentioned, Kushner and Witkoff, are working on those negotiations as well. That said, Witkoff in particular, but the both of them have been to Moscow many times, 8 or 9 times. And they've never been, Maciej, neither has ever been to Kyiv, to Ukraine. So the Ukrainians they don't have great expectations that these negotiations will be productive.
Let's move on to Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan held parliamentary elections today, and President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev is, largely expected to further consolidate power in his hands. Now, he's expanding ties with China, he's expanding ties with the EU, and has criticized Vladimir Putin lately over the war in Ukraine. So is Kazakhstan lost to Russia? And if so, what implications does it have for Ukraine?
So Ukraine was glad to hear the president of Kazakhstan tell the president of Russia, tell Putin, that the war should be frozen, stopped, the ceasefire in place. That's exactly what the Ukrainians have been pushing for. And to hear the Kazakhstan leaders making those exact same points is good news for the Ukrainians. I think it also demonstrates, Maciej, that Putin's influence around the world is declining. His economics are bad. He's not doing well on the battlefield. He has no good options. All he can do is bomb Ukrainian civilians. And that doesn't give him authority in the world.
So let me ask you one more last question about the Russian propaganda. So Vladimir Putin claims that Ukraine has opened Pandora's box by attacking Russian economic targets, and that Moscow will hit back, destroying the opponent's, let me quote exactly, most sensitive economic sectors. What exactly do you think Putin is talking about here, and should Kyiv take these threats seriously?
Of course, you have to take threats seriously, but the Russians have been attacking Ukraine for 4.5 years, really for 12 years, but really intensely over the past several months. So they will continue to do that. I don't think there's anything new in Putin's threats. The Ukrainians are getting ready. They're getting ready for the winter. It's going to be a very bad winter. Hopefully not as bad this year as last year when the weather was so bad. But the Ukrainians are preparing for the damage that the Russians will try to inflict again on the energy, to make the Ukrainians miserable. That's his only strategy. His only strategy is to bombard the Ukrainians into submission. And they won't submit, Maciej. They will not submit.
William B. Taylor, former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Maciej.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World. Have a fantastic week and see you soon back here on TVP World.